When the wildfire radio crackled to life at 4:47 p.m., 30-year-old Henry Vance was already running toward the smoke. One silver sedan sat abandoned at the North Ridge trailhead. Everyone else had evacuated hours ago. He found her on concrete steps in the rain, ankles shattered, refusing rescue. She told him to leave her behind. He looked at her once, smelled the approaching inferno, and made a choice that would change both their lives forever. He lifted her into his arms and ran straight into the flames. If you want to see how a single father's refusal to leave anyone behind turns a wildfire evacuation into something neither of them expected, stay with me until the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Hit that like button if you're ready for a story about survival, secrets, and second chances carved out of ash and snow. Henry Vance had been a single father for 4 years, a volunteer search and rescue responder for 6, and had carried the weight of one failed rescue for nearly a decade. He didn't talk about that last part. Not to his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, who asked him every morning if he was going to save someone that day. Not to the other volunteers who clapped him on the back after successful evacuations. And certainly not to the woman whose face still appeared in his nightmares. The hiker he'd reached too late on a cliffside in heavy rain, her hand slipping from his, just as the lightning strike illuminated her terrified eyes. He carried that weight the way he carried everything else, quietly, with his jaw set and his boots laced tight. The call came through on a Thursday afternoon in late September, when the Pacific Northwest was experiencing the kind of drought that turned forests into kindling. Henry had just picked Lily up from school and was helping her with math homework at their small kitchen table when his radio hissed to life. All units, we have a fast-moving wildfire that jumped Cascade Creek near North Ridge. Winds shifting northeast. Evacuation orders in effect for sectors 7 through 12. Repeat, evacuation orders in effect. Lily looked up from her worksheet, her dark eyes wide. Daddy? Henry's mind was already moving through logistics. North Ridge was 15 minutes away. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, could watch Lily. She'd done it before. He reached for his phone. It's okay, sweetheart. I just need to go help some people get to safety. Like always? Like always. 20 minutes later, Henry was in his truck, heading toward the orange glow that painted the eastern sky. The radio chatter told him what he needed to know. Most residents had already evacuated. The main highway was being used as a fire break, and air support was grounded due to high winds. The fire had started small that morning, but dry conditions and sudden gusts had turned it into something hungry and unpredictable. He arrived at the North Ridge recreation area just as the first sheriff's deputy was setting up road closure signs. The parking lot was empty except for one vehicle, a silver Honda sedan with Oregon plates and a rental company sticker. The deputy, a young guy named Martinez, who Henry recognized from previous operations, jogged over as Henry stepped out of his truck. Vance, good timing. We think everyone's out, but that car's been sitting there for 3 hours. Owner might have hiked in before the evacuation order. Henry studied the sedan. The doors were locked. A professional-looking shoulder bag sat in the back seat next to a rolled sleeping bag. Anyone check the trailhead? Not yet. Fire's moving fast. We're supposed to be pulling back in 10 minutes. Henry grabbed his pack from the truck bed, the one he kept loaded with emergency supplies, rope, first aid kit, water, emergency blanket, and flares. I'll do a quick sweep. If they're on the trail, they'll be heading down. Martinez hesitated. Captain said, I know what the captain said. Henry's tone wasn't harsh, just matter of fact. He'd had this conversation before. 10 minutes. If I'm not back, I'm taking the access road out the north side. He didn't wait for permission. The smell of smoke was already thick in the air, and the wind carried ash like snow. Henry started up the main trail at a steady jog, his eyes scanning for movement, footprints, anything that might indicate which direction the car's owner had gone. The North Ridge Trail system was a network of paths that wound through old-growth forest before climbing to a series of overlooks. Popular with day hikers and photographers, it offered stunning views of the valley, but it also had multiple branches, some of which led to dead ends or steep terrain. Henry had gone maybe half a mile when he saw her. She was sitting on a concrete retaining wall where the trail curved around a small maintenance structure. Not walking, not calling for help, just sitting there in the rain that had started to fall, Her face turned toward the approaching wall of smoke to the south. He slowed as he approached, taking in the details. Mid-20s, athletic build, dark hair plastered to her face by rain. Her right ankle was swollen to nearly twice its normal size, the joint already turning deep purple. A professional camera hung around her neck, and her hiking boots were caked in mud. She didn't look scared. She looked furious. "Ma'am, I'm with search and rescue. We need to evacuate now." She didn't turn to look at him. "I can't walk." "I can help you walk." "No." Her voice was flat. "You can't." "I tried. I got maybe 20 feet before I collapsed. The ankle's fractured or dislocated, I can't tell which. You need to leave me and get yourself out." Henry moved closer, kneeling beside her to examine the injury. The swelling was severe, and when he gently touched the area around the joint, he could feel heat radiating through her sock. "How long have you been sitting here?" 2 hours. Maybe 3. I called 911, but the call kept dropping. I was trying to decide whether to drag myself down the trail or just wait when the rain started. "What's your name?" She finally looked at him. Her eyes were green, sharp with intelligence and pain. "Why does that matter?" "Because I'm about to carry you down this mountain, and I'd like to know who I'm carrying." Mara Sutton." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And you're not carrying me anywhere. The fire's too close. You'll never make it with extra weight." Henry was already assessing their options. The main trail back to the parking lot would take them directly toward the thickest smoke. But there was another route, a fire access road that branched off about a quarter-mile uphill. It was longer and steeper, but it would take them parallel to the fire's current path instead of straight into it. "The fire road," he said, more to himself than to her. "We can circle around." "Did you hear what I said? You can't—" Henry stood and turned his back to her, kneeling down. "Arms around my neck." "Are you insane?" "Probably. Arms around my neck, Mara. We're leaving." For a moment she didn't move. Then, with a sharp exhale of frustration and pain, she wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Henry hooked his arms under her thighs and stood, adjusting her weight until she was secure against his back. She was lighter than he'd expected, but still solid muscle and bone, and her injured ankle knocked against his side as he started walking. She hissed in pain. "Sorry," he muttered. "Try to keep it still." "Try to keep it still," he says, like I'm not being bounced around on someone's back in the middle of a wildfire. Despite everything, Henry almost smiled. "You always this pleasant when someone's saving your life?" "I'm not sure you're saving it yet. You might be killing us both." The rain intensified as they moved uphill, which was good and bad. Good because it would slow the fire. Bad because it made the trail slippery and reduced visibility. Henry's legs burned within the first 5 minutes, but he kept his pace steady, his breathing controlled. He'd done plenty of physical training for search and rescue, but carrying another adult up a mountain trail was different from hauling equipment or doing conditioning exercises. Mara was silent for several minutes before she spoke again. "You didn't tell me your name." "Henry." "Henry Vance." "Well, Henry Vance, I hope you know what you're doing." "Me too." They reached the junction where the fire access road branched off, and Henry paused to catch his breath and check their position. The smoke was thicker now, and he could hear the distant roar of the fire consuming dry timber. The access road was barely more than a dirt path, rutted from spring runoff and overgrown with brush. "Why were you up here?" Henry asked as he started moving again. Talking helped keep his mind off the growing ache in his shoulders and thighs. "Work," Mara said tersely. "What kind of work involves hiking into a wildfire zone?" She was quiet for so long that he thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice tight with suppressed anger, "I'm a land surveyor. I was contracted to verify boundary markers for a development project. Someone moved them." "Moved them?" "Deliberately. To make it look like I screwed up the initial survey. My former business partner wants the contract to fail so he can swoop in with his own firm and take over." Henry filed that information away, focusing on navigating around a fallen log that blocked part of the trail. "Former partner sounds like a piece of work." "That's putting it mildly. Marcus Hale, brilliant businessman, absolute snake as a human being. We started the surveying company together 5 years ago. I did the field work, he handled the business side. Last year, he tried to force me out by claiming I was making errors in my surveys. When I proved I wasn't, he started his own competing firm and has been sabotaging my contracts ever since. Can't you sue him? With what evidence? He's careful. Everything looks like coincidence or my own mistakes. Moving trail markers, though, that's bold even for him. It nearly got me killed when I followed the false markers straight into unstable terrain. That's how I wrecked my ankle. Henry's jaw tightened. He didn't know this Marcus Hale, but he already didn't like him. You think he knew about the fire risk? I don't know what to think anymore. The fire started this morning, after I'd already been up here for hours. Could be coincidence. Could be he doesn't care if his sabotage puts me in danger. She paused. Or worse. The implication hung in the smoke-thick air. Henry pushed it aside to focus on immediate survival. They'd been climbing for nearly 20 minutes, and his legs were shaking. He needed to rest, but the fire was close enough now that he could see orange light flickering through the trees behind them. They rounded a switchback, and Henry's heart sank. A large Douglas fir had fallen across the access road, probably within the last few hours. Its massive trunk created a barrier at least 4 feet high. Can you climb over? Mara asked. Not with you on my back. Henry lowered himself carefully to one knee, letting Mara slide off. She gasped as her injured foot touched the ground. Okay, he said, breathing hard. New plan. I'm going to climb over first, then pull you up. That's not a plan. That's suicide. Just leave me here and... Not happening. Henry was already scaling the trunk, his boots finding purchase on the rough bark. At the top, he turned and extended his hand. Grab on. Mara stared at him, rain streaming down her face. Then she reached up. The next few minutes were a study in controlled chaos. Henry pulled while Mara pushed with her good leg, her face white with pain as her injured ankle dragged against the bark. They got her to the top of the log, and Henry jumped down on the other side before reaching up to help her down. She collapsed against his chest when her feet hit the ground, breathing hard. You're completely insane. Yeah, I'm getting that a lot today. Henry knelt again. Come on, we're not done yet. This time when Mara climbed onto his back, her grip was tighter, more trusting. Henry stood and resumed walking, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. The rain was soaking through his jacket now, and the temperature was dropping as afternoon faded toward evening. Tell me about you, Mara said suddenly. What? Talk to me. Tell me about your life. It'll distract me from the fact that we're probably going to die up here. We're not going to die. Humor me anyway. Henry navigated around a washout in the trail, his boots sinking into mud. Not much to tell. I'm a carpenter, single dad to a 7-year-old daughter named Lily. Volunteer search and rescue on weekends. Carpenter and hero. Quite the combination. I'm not a hero. You're literally carrying me up a mountain to escape a wildfire. That's pretty heroic in my book. Henry was silent for a moment. I failed a rescue once, 10 years ago. Woman fell from a cliff ledge during a storm. I reached her, but I couldn't hold on. She fell before the backup team arrived. That wasn't your fault. I was the first responder. It was my job to keep her safe until help came. And sometimes the mountain doesn't care about whose job it is. Mara's voice was softer now. I've worked outdoors long enough to know that nature doesn't negotiate. You did what you could. Henry didn't respond, but something in his chest loosened slightly. They walked in silence for a while. The only sounds their breathing and the crackle of fire growing closer despite their best efforts to stay ahead of it. The access road began to climb more steeply, and Henry's pace slowed. His shoulders were on fire, his thighs trembling with each step. He could feel Mara shivering against his back. Whether from cold, shock, or pain, he wasn't sure. Almost there, he muttered, though he had no idea if that was true. Where's there? Old fire lookout tower, about half a mile ahead. We can shelter there until the fire passes or help arrives. How do you know there's a tower? I've lived in this area my whole life. Used to hike up here with my dad when I was a kid. The memory came unexpectedly. His father's hand on his shoulder, teaching him to read topographic maps, showing him how to identify landmarks. His father had been gone for 15 years now, but his lessons remained. The tower emerged from the rain and smoke like a ghost, a 2-story wooden structure perched on a rocky outcrop above the tree line. It had been abandoned for years, used now only by the occasional hiker seeking shelter. Henry had never been so grateful to see it. He climbed the external stairs with the last of his strength and shouldered open the door. Inside, the tower was sparse but dry. A single room with windows on all sides, a few pieces of battered furniture, and old emergency supplies in sealed containers. Henry lowered Mara onto a bench and immediately collapsed onto the floor, his chest heaving. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. They just breathed. Finally, Mara broke the silence. "You did it." Henry rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling. "Not yet. Fire's still coming. But we're not in it. That counts for something." Henry forced himself to sit up. His body protested every movement, but there was work to do. He checked the emergency supplies. There was a first aid kit, some emergency blankets, old flares, and a battery-powered radio that might or might not still work. He also found a logbook where hikers had left notes, some recent, some dating back years. He returned to Mara and knelt by her injured ankle. "Let me see it." She grimaced as he carefully removed her boot and sock. The swelling had worsened, and the bruising now extended halfway up her calf. Henry opened the first aid kit and found an elastic bandage. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "Everything hurts. Just do it." He wrapped the ankle as gently as he could, but Mara still bit back a cry of pain. When he finished, he elevated her leg on a folded emergency blanket. "You need to stay off it completely," he said. "Not like I have much choice." Henry moved to the windows, checking each direction. The fire was visible to the south and east now, a wall of orange and red consuming everything in its path. But the wind was shifting, and the rain was intensifying. If they were lucky, the storm would slow the fire's advance enough for them to survive the night. If they were lucky. He tried the radio, but got only static. Cell service had been non-existent since they left the parking lot. They were on their own. "What time is it?" Mara asked. Henry checked his watch. "Just after 6. "Your daughter. You said you have a daughter. She must be worried." "She's with a neighbor. Mrs. Chen knows what I do. She'll keep Lily safe and distracted." Even as he said it, Henry felt the familiar guilt that came with every rescue call. Lily was proud of what he did, but she was also 7 years old and sometimes woke up crying from nightmares about her daddy not coming home. "Tell me about her," Mara said. Henry found himself smiling despite their circumstances. "She's smart. Too smart sometimes. Loves science and asks about a million questions a day. Wants to be a marine biologist when she grows up, even though we're nowhere near the ocean." "Where's her mom?" The smile faded. "Car accident, 4 years ago. She was driving home from a work conference when a drunk driver crossed the center line." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." Henry turned away from the window. "Lily doesn't remember her much. I try to keep her memory alive with stories and photos, but it's not the same. You're doing it alone. Most of the time. We have a good community. People help. But yeah, it's mostly just us." Thunder rumbled outside, followed by a flash of lightning that illuminated the room. Henry checked the windows again and realized the wind had shifted more dramatically than he'd thought. The fire was moving east now, pushed by the storm. They weren't out of danger, but they were no longer in its direct path. "We might actually make it," Mara said quietly. "Don't jinx it." She laughed, and this time it sounded genuine. "You know, when I woke up this morning, I did not have 'get rescued by a heroic single dad during a wildfire' on my bingo card. When I woke up this morning, I was planning to spend the evening helping my daughter build a volcano for her science project. Well, you're definitely getting the real-life volcano experience now." As night fell and the temperature dropped, Henry distributed the emergency blankets and started a small fire in the tower's old wood stove using dried wood from a supply box. The warmth was immediate and welcome. He made a simple meal from the emergency rations, nothing fancy, but calories they both needed. They ate in comfortable silence, and then Mara spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you come after me? You could have left me there." "Told yourself you tried and the fire was too close. No one would have blamed you." Henry stared at the flames in the stove. "I don't leave people behind. Even when staying might get you killed? Especially then." He met her eyes. "The woman who fell from the cliff. I reached her, but I couldn't hold on. Not because I wasn't strong enough, but because I hesitated for just a second. I questioned whether I could do it. And in that second, she slipped. I've spent 10 years wondering what would have happened if I hadn't hesitated. If I'd just committed fully, consequences be damned. So you don't hesitate anymore. Not when someone's life is on the line. Mara was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Thank you for not hesitating today." "You're welcome." The storm raged outside, rain hammering the tower's roof and lightning illuminating the forest below. The fire was still burning, but it was moving away from them now, driven by wind and rain toward less populated areas. They would likely be able to descend in the morning. As midnight approached, exhaustion finally overtook them both. Henry gave Mara the bench to sleep on and made himself as comfortable as possible on the floor, using his pack as a pillow. The tower was cold despite the stove, and he could hear Mara's teeth chattering. Without thinking too much about it, he grabbed one of the emergency blankets and moved to the bench. "Scoot over." She looked at him with wide eyes. "What?" "We need to share body heat. You're going into shock from the cold and the injury. I've seen hypothermia before. This is how it starts." After a moment's hesitation, Mara shifted to make room. Henry lay down beside her, careful not to jostle her injured ankle, and draped the blanket over both of them. The space was cramped and awkward, but the shared warmth was immediate. "This is weird," Mara muttered. "Yeah, but you'll live. That's the goal." They lay there in the darkness, listening to the storm. Gradually, Mara's shivering subsided and her breathing evened out. Henry stayed awake, monitoring the fire through the windows, listening for any sign that they were in danger. Somewhere around 2 a.m, Mara spoke into the darkness. "Henry?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad it was you who found me." He didn't know what to say to that, so he simply responded, "Get some sleep, Mara. Morning's going to come whether we're ready or not." She was quiet again, and eventually Henry heard the soft rhythm of her breathing that indicated sleep. He let himself relax slightly, though he didn't close his eyes. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the mountain, and the fire burned itself toward exhaustion against wet timber and shifting winds. Tomorrow they would have to descend. Tomorrow they would have to face whatever consequences waited below. Authorities, questions, the aftermath of survival. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, in a forgotten fire tower on a mountain that refused to let them go, two strangers had become something else. Something forged in smoke and rain, and the simple, absolute refusal to leave anyone behind. Henry didn't know what came next. He just knew that when morning came, he would help Mara down this mountain the same way he'd carried her up, one step at a time, no hesitation, no looking back. Outside, lightning split the sky again, and in its brief illumination, Henry could see the fire retreating to the east, a defeated orange glow against the black wall of storm. They had survived the worst of it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Dawn broke gray and cold over the mountain, the kind of light that revealed more than it promised. Henry woke to the sound of helicopter rotors in the distance and the acrid smell of wet ash. His entire body was stiff, muscles protesting as he carefully extracted himself from the shared warmth of the emergency blanket without waking Mara. He moved to the window and surveyed the damage. The forest below looked like a battlefield. Charred trees stood like skeletal soldiers, smoke still rising from smoldering patches where the fire had burned hottest. But the storm had done its work. The main blaze had moved east into the wilderness areas, away from populated zones. Behind him, Mara stirred and immediately gasped in pain as she tried to move her injured ankle. "Don't," Henry said, turning from the window. "Stay still. Let me check it first." He knelt beside the bench and carefully unwrapped the elastic bandage. The swelling had gone down slightly, but the bruising had deepened to a violent purple-black that spread from her foot halfway to her knee. When he gently probed the area around the joint, Mara's sharp intake of breath told him everything he needed to know. "It's bad, isn't it?" she asked. "You need a hospital, x-rays, probably surgery." Henry rewrapped the ankle with fresh bandaging from the first aid kit. "But first we need to get down this mountain." "That's going to be a problem." "I'll carry you again." Mara shook her head. "Henry, you barely made it up here yesterday. Going down is harder, more strain on your knees, easier to slip. And I'm not going to let you destroy your body because I was stupid enough to follow fake trail markers." You weren't stupid. You were sabotaged. Henry stood and checked his watch. 6:15. And we don't have much choice. The fire's moved on, but there's still smoke and unstable ground. The longer we wait, the more dangerous the descent becomes. Before Mara could argue further, the battery-powered radio on the shelf crackled to life. Henry lunged for it. All search and rescue units, this is base command. The North Ridge fire is now 60% contained. Ground crews are beginning damage assessment. Any personnel in the area, please respond with your location and status. Henry grabbed the radio. This is Henry Vance, volunteer SAR. I'm at the old fire lookout tower on North Ridge with one civilian, female, mid-20s, serious ankle injury. We sheltered here overnight. Over. Static. Then, Vance, this is Captain Morrison. Thank God you're alive. Martinez said you went in yesterday afternoon and never came back out. What's your status? Over. Mobile but slow. The civilian can't walk. I'll need to carry her down. Over. Negative, Vance. Hold position. We're sending a helicopter for medical evacuation. Weather's clearing enough for flight. ETA 30 minutes. Over. Relief washed through Henry so powerfully that his knees almost buckled. Copy that, Captain. We'll be ready. Over. He set down the radio and turned to find Mara staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked. You were really going to carry me all the way down, weren't you? Even though it would have taken hours and probably injured you. Yes. Why? Henry moved back to the window, watching the helicopter he'd heard earlier disappear over the ridgeline. Because that's what you do for people. You show up. You don't quit. You don't leave them behind just because it's hard. Is that what your father taught you? The question caught him off guard. How did you know? You mentioned him last night. Said he used to bring you up here. Henry nodded slowly. He was a firefighter. Died in a warehouse fire when I was 15. He always said the job wasn't about being fearless. It was about doing what needed to be done despite the fear. About being someone people could count on when everything went to hell. Sounds like a good man. He was the best man I've ever known. Henry's throat tightened. I spent years trying to figure out how to be half as good as he was. I'm still working on it. Mara was quiet for a moment, then said softly, I think you're doing better than you realize. Before Henry could respond, the radio crackled again. This time, it was a different voice, younger, more urgent. Base Command, this is Forest Service Officer Chen. We've got a situation developing at the North Ridge trailhead. There's a civilian here claiming he's looking for someone. A business associate who didn't return from a survey hike yesterday. He's being aggressive with our personnel and demanding access to the restricted area. Advises the missing person is Mara Sutton. Over. Henry and Mara locked eyes. Her face had gone pale. That's Marcus, she whispered. Marcus Hale. Henry grabbed the radio. Captain Morrison, this is Vance. I'm with Mara Sutton right now. She's the injured civilian I reported. Her ankle injury was caused by deliberately moved trail markers, possible sabotage. The man at the trailhead may be connected. Over. There was a longer pause before Morrison responded. Say again, Vance. Are you reporting a crime? Over. Henry looked at Mara, who nodded grimly. Affirmative, Captain. Ms. Sutton has evidence that her business competitor may have tampered with survey markers, leading her into dangerous terrain. Given the timing with the fire, we need law enforcement involved. Over. Copy that. I'm contacting the county sheriff. Helicopter is 7 minutes out. Stand by. Over. Mara pulled herself into a sitting position, wincing. He's going to deny everything. He's too smart to leave proof. You said you were surveying yesterday. Did you take photos? Document the moved markers. Yes, but Mara's eyes widened. My camera and my field notebook. They're in my backpack. Henry looked around the small tower room. Where's your pack? I dropped it when I fell. It should still be on the trail where you found me. Henry's mind raced. The trail where he'd found Mara was at least a mile downhill, possibly already searched by ground crews. But if that evidence existed, it could make the difference between sabotage charges and Marcus walking away clean. I'll get it, he said. Henry, no. The helicopter will be here soon. You can't. 7 minutes, Morrison said. I can get down to that trail section in 5 if I run. I'll be back before they land. And if you're not? If something happens? Henry was already checking his gear, making sure he had his radio clipped to his belt. Then you tell them where to find me, but nothing's going to happen. I'm just retrieving evidence. This is insane. That evidence isn't worth risking your life. Henry paused at the door and looked back at her. Last night you told me your former partner has been sabotaging your business for a year. You think he moved those markers by accident? You think it's coincidence that you ended up injured on a mountain the same day a wildfire started? Mara's jaw tightened. You think he set the fire? I think we need that evidence before he has a chance to destroy it. Henry pulled the door open. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Very funny. He took the external stairs 3 at a time and hit the ground running. His legs screamed in protest after yesterday's ordeal, but he pushed through it, following the fire access road back down the way they'd come. The ground was slippery with mud and ash, and twice he nearly lost his footing, but he kept moving. The fallen Douglas fir loomed ahead. Henry vaulted over it with considerably more ease than they'd managed last night and continued down. Smoke still hung in the air, making his eyes water, but the path was clear enough to navigate. He reached the main trail junction and turned toward where he'd found Mara. The concrete retaining wall came into view, and there, partially hidden under a blackberry bush, was a navy blue backpack. Henry grabbed it and immediately unzipped the main compartment. Inside was a professional field notebook with waterproof pages, a high-end digital camera, and what looked like a portable GPS unit. He quickly checked the camera's memory card, still intact. The radio on his belt squawked. Vance, this is Morrison. Helicopter is on approach. Where are you? Over. Henry keyed the radio while starting back up the trail at a dead run. Retrieving evidence, Captain. 2 minutes out. Over. Negative, Vance. Return to the tower immediately. We need visual confirmation of your position for the helicopter. Over. Copy that, on my way. Over. Henry pushed harder, his lungs burning. The fallen tree appeared ahead and he launched himself over it without breaking stride, landing hard on the other side but keeping his feet. The tower was visible now through the thinning smoke. The helicopter appeared over the ridgeline, a Coast Guard rescue bird with its distinctive orange and white markings. Henry burst from the tree line just as it began its descent toward the rocky outcrop near the tower. He took the external stairs 2 at a time and crashed through the door, breathless and covered in fresh ash. Mara was sitting upright on the bench, her face tight with worry that transformed to relief when she saw him. You're an idiot, she said. Got your pack. Henry dropped it beside her and moved to the window to signal the helicopter crew. 2 rescue personnel were already rappelling down from the hovering aircraft. Within minutes, they'd entered the tower and were assessing Mara's condition with professional efficiency. The lead medic, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, secured Mara's ankle in a rigid splint and started an IV for fluids and pain medication. We're going to stretcher you up, the medic explained to Mara. It'll be uncomfortable, but quick. Your friend here did good work with the initial wrapping. He's good at a lot of things, Mara said, her voice slightly slurred from the pain meds starting to take effect. The second rescue tech, a younger man built like a linebacker, turned to Henry. You're coming up too, right? Henry hesitated. I can hike down. You should save the lift capacity for people who need it. Captain's orders. You've been out here overnight in fire conditions. Protocol is medical evaluation. Henry wanted to argue, but he was suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. His shoulders were still burning from yesterday's carry, his legs felt like rubber, and he'd probably inhaled more smoke than was healthy. Okay? They secured Mara to the rescue stretcher and lifted her first, the helicopter's winch pulling her up smoothly despite the wind. Henry watched her disappear into the aircraft, then accepted his own harness from the linebacker tech. First time? The tech asked with a grin. Yeah. Don't look down. Or do, if you like adrenaline. Henry chose not to look down. The ascent was faster than he'd expected, and then hands were pulling him into the helicopter cabin. He secured himself in a jump seat next to where they'd strapped Mara's stretcher. She reached out and grabbed his hand as the helicopter banked away from the mountain. Thank you, she said, barely audible over the rotor noise. Henry squeezed her hand once, then released it as the medic moved in to adjust her IV. Through the window, he could see the full scope of the fire's damage. Miles of blackened forest, entire hillsides reduced to ash. They'd been lucky. Incredibly lucky. The flight to the regional medical center took 15 minutes. They landed on the hospital's rooftop helipad, where a trauma team was already waiting. Mara was whisked away on a gurney, her backpack still clutched protectively against her chest. Henry was directed to the emergency department for evaluation, where a physician's assistant who looked about 12 years old checked his vitals, listened to his lungs, and declared him remarkably healthy for someone who'd spent a night on a burning mountain. "You should rest," the PA said. "Your body's been through significant stress. Any chest pain, difficulty breathing, or dizziness, you come back immediately." "I will." "Can you tell me where they took Mara Sutton?" "The woman from the rescue? Orthopedic surgery, probably. That ankle's going to need hardware." Henry thanked him and made his way to the surgical floor's waiting area. Captain Morrison was already there, along with 2 county sheriff's deputies, and surprisingly, Mrs. Chen with Lily. His daughter launched herself at him the moment she spotted him. "Daddy!" Henry caught her and pulled her into a fierce hug, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm okay." "Mrs. Chen said you were rescuing someone from a fire. She said you were a hero." "Mrs. Chen exaggerates." "I do not," Mrs. Chen said firmly. She was a tiny woman in her 70s with steel in her spine. "You went into a wildfire to save a stranger. That's the definition of heroic." One of the deputies, a weathered man with sergeant's stripes, stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, I'm Sergeant Rodriguez. We need to ask you some questions about what happened on the mountain." Henry set Lily down, but kept hold of her hand. "Of course. But first, can someone tell me about Mara, Ms. Sutton?" "She's in surgery now," Captain Morrison said. "Fractured ankle in 3 places, dislocated joint. They're putting in pins and plates. She'll be here a few days, but the doctors say she should recover full function." "Good. That's good." Sergeant Rodriguez pulled out a notebook. "Ms. Sutton made some serious allegations before they took her to surgery. She claims someone deliberately moved survey markers to sabotage her work, and that this sabotage directly led to her injury. She also suggested there might be a connection to the fire. Can you walk us through what she told you?" For the next 30 minutes, Henry recounted everything: finding Mara injured, her explanation about Marcus Hale and the moved markers, their night in the tower, and the radio call that morning about Hale showing up at the trailhead. "He was looking for her," Rodriguez said, making notes. Claimed he was worried about his business associate. But here's the interesting part. Fire investigators found accelerant residue at the origin point of the blaze. Someone set that fire deliberately. Henry's blood ran cold. "You think Hale—" "We don't think anything yet, but we're investigating." Rodriguez closed his notebook. "Did Ms. Sutton happen to mention if she had any evidence of the marker tampering?" "Her camera and field notebook. I retrieved them from her backpack this morning. She had them with her when they took her to surgery." The second deputy, a younger woman, spoke up. "We'll need to take possession of those as evidence." "She knows. She wanted them protected." Rodriguez nodded. "We've already got officers at the trailhead and at Mr. Hale's office. If there's a connection to the fire, we'll find it." After the deputies left, Morrison pulled Henry aside. "You did good work up there, Vance, but you also violated direct orders to evacuate. I should suspend you from the volunteer roster." Henry met his captain's eyes steadily. "I understand, sir," Morrison sighed. "But given that you saved a woman's life and potentially uncovered an arson case, I'm going to overlook it this time. Don't make a habit of being a cowboy." "No, sir." After Morrison left, Mrs. Chen insisted on taking Henry and Lily home. In the car, Lily chattered about her day at school and the science project they still needed to finish, her earlier worry forgotten in the resilience of childhood. But that night, after he'd tucked Lily into bed and stood in the shower letting hot water pound against his aching muscles, Henry found himself thinking about Mara, about the way she'd refused to panic even when injured and trapped by fire. About her anger at being sabotaged, her determination to protect her evidence, about the feel of her arms around his neck as he carried her up the mountain. He barely knew her. One night in a fire tower didn't mean anything beyond 2 people surviving together, except it felt like it meant something. Henry pushed the thought away and focused on the practical. She was in surgery, would be recovering for days. He had work tomorrow, a kitchen renovation that was already behind schedule. Life went on. 3 days later, Henry was cutting crown molding in his client's kitchen when his phone rang. Unknown number. This is Henry. Hi, it's Mara. He nearly dropped his circular saw. Hey, how are you? How's the ankle? Bionic. They put in enough hardware that I could probably pick up radio signals. Her voice sounded stronger than the last time he'd heard it. Listen, I'm still at the hospital, but the sheriff's department was here this morning. I thought you'd want to know. They arrested Marcus. Henry stepped outside into the crisp autumn air. For what? Everything. The fire investigation found evidence that he purchased the accelerant used at the origin point. His credit card records show he bought it 2 days before the fire. And get this, there's security footage from a trail camera that shows him moving the survey markers the morning I went up there. He tried to kill you. Maybe. Or maybe he just wanted to discredit me and didn't care if I got hurt in the process. Either way, he's facing arson charges, reckless endangerment, evidence tampering, and about 6 other things. Mara paused. I wanted to say thank you. If you hadn't gone back for my equipment, we might not have had enough evidence. You did the important part. You documented everything. I documented. You risked your life to make sure that documentation wasn't destroyed. Another pause. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you come see me after the rescue? In the hospital. The nurses told me you waited in the surgical wing for hours, even though they wouldn't let you see me. Henry hadn't realized anyone noticed. I wanted to make sure you were okay. We're strangers, Henry. You'd already saved my life. You didn't owe me anything else. Maybe I wanted to know how the story ended. The story? Of the woman I carried down a mountain. I figured I was invested at that point. He could hear the smile in her voice. Well, the story isn't over yet. I'm being discharged tomorrow. Physical therapy for the next few months, but I should be back to work by spring. That's great, I'm glad. There's one problem, though. What's that? I don't have a car. Mine's still at the trailhead parking lot, and even if it wasn't, I can't drive with this ankle. And I need to get back to my apartment in Portland, which is 2 hours away. Henry leaned against his truck. Are you asking me for a ride? I'm asking if you know anyone who might be willing to help a one-legged surveyor get home. Someone patient, someone who doesn't mind long drives, someone who maybe carried her up a mountain once and might be convinced to help her one more time. I might know someone like that. Yeah? Yeah, what time should I pick you up? The next day, Henry drove to the hospital with Lily in the back seat, who'd insisted on coming to meet Daddy's mountain friend. Mara was waiting in a wheelchair at the hospital entrance, her right leg in a walking boot, crutches across her lap, and a smile that made Henry's heart do something complicated. Lily was out of the truck before Henry could stop her. Are you Miss Mara? Daddy said you hurt your ankle in the fire. I am, and I did. You must be Lily. Did you really get rescued by a helicopter? That's so cool. Mara laughed. It was pretty cool. But the coolest part was your dad carrying me all the way to the rescue tower. He's pretty strong. Lily beamed with pride. He carries me all the time, even when I'm too big. You're never too big, Henry said, helping Mara into the passenger seat and stowing her crutches in the back. And buckle up, both of you. It's a long drive. The drive to Portland was easy. Lily entertained Mara with stories about school and her science project. They'd built the volcano finally, and it had erupted all over Mrs. Chen's kitchen floor. Mara shared stories about surveying work, about mountains she'd climbed and forests she'd mapped. When they reached Mara's apartment building in northwest Portland, Henry carried her bag up 3 flights of stairs while she navigated on crutches. Her apartment was small but bright, filled with maps and survey equipment and photos of wild places. Thank you, she said at the door, for everything, the rescue, the evidence, the ride, all of it. You're welcome. Lily tugged on Henry's sleeve. Daddy, can Ms. Mara come to dinner at our house sometime? I want to show her our photo wall. Henry looked at Mara, who was looking back with an expression he was learning to recognize, the one that said she was weighing options, calculating risks, deciding whether to trust something. I'd like that, Mara said finally. Once I can navigate stairs better, maybe in a few weeks? It's a date, Lily announced. I mean, not a date, just dinner. Right, Daddy? Right, Henry managed. Just dinner. But as they drove home, with Lily falling asleep in the back seat and the city lights of Portland fading behind them, Henry thought about the way Mara had looked at him when he'd carried her bag, the way she'd held onto his arm for balance when her crutches slipped on the apartment stairs. Maybe it was just gratitude, survivor's bond, the strange intimacy that came from shared trauma. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for when they'd met on that smoke-filled mountain. The answer, Henry suspected, would reveal itself in time. For now, it was enough to know that they'd both survived, that evidence had been protected, that justice was being served, and that in 3 weeks, Mara Sutton would sit at his dinner table, meet his daughter properly, and maybe, just maybe, they'd discover what happened after the rescue was over and the real story began. 3 weeks turned into 4, then 5. Mara called twice to reschedule the dinner, both times apologizing profusely. The first time was because of a complication with her physical therapy that required an additional minor procedure. The second time was because Marcus Hale's legal team had filed motions requiring her testimony in pre-trial depositions. "I'm not avoiding you," she said during the second call, and Henry could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "I promise I'm not." "I know," Henry said, though part of him wondered. They'd survived something extraordinary together, but maybe that was all it was. Extraordinary circumstances that didn't translate to ordinary life. "How's the case going?" "His lawyers are trying to argue that the fire was accidental, that he was just doing competitive research when he moved the markers, not sabotage. It's ridiculous, but they're making me relive every detail." She paused. "The prosecutor says we have a strong case. The trail camera footage is damning, and the accelerant purchase is basically a signed confession, but it's still exhausting." "I can imagine. Can I ask you something?" Her tone shifted, became more uncertain. "Do you ever think about that night in the tower?" Henry looked out his kitchen window at the November rain. "Every day." "Me too." A long silence. "I keep thinking about what you said, that you don't leave people behind, that you don't hesitate anymore." "Yeah?" "I've spent the last month realizing that I do hesitate. All the time. I hesitate to trust people after what Marcus did. I hesitate to believe that someone would help me without wanting something in return. I hesitate to think that what we went through meant anything beyond survival." Henry's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you think it meant?" "I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. If you're willing to wait a little longer." "I'm willing. Even though I keep canceling dinner with your daughter?" "Lily understands. She asks about you, though. Wants to know when the mountain lady is coming to visit." Mara laughed, and it sounded genuine. "The mountain lady. I like that. Tell her soon. Tell her as soon as I can walk without looking like a baby giraffe on crutches, I'll be there." "I'll tell her." That conversation was in late November. December brought the first heavy snow, the kind that blanketed the mountains and turned Henry's small town into something from a postcard. He took Lily sledding on weekends and worked on indoor projects during the week. A bathroom renovation here, custom built-ins there. The work was steady and satisfying, and it kept his hands busy even when his mind wandered to a woman in Portland with green eyes and a refusal to give up. Then, 3 days before Christmas, his phone rang at 6 in the morning. "Henry, it's Mara. I need help." He was immediately awake, already reaching for his jeans. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, nothing like that. It's Marcus. He made bail yesterday. His family posted it, and last night someone broke into my apartment." Henry's blood went cold. "Are you safe? Where are you?" "I'm fine. I wasn't home when it happened. I was at my lawyer's office going over testimony. But Henry, they trashed the place. Destroyed my survey equipment, my computer, all my backup files. The police think it was Marcus or someone he hired, trying to intimidate me before trial." "Where are you right now?" "At a hotel. The police said I shouldn't stay at the apartment until they process the scene and improve security. But Henry, I can't afford to stay in hotels indefinitely. My business is barely holding together as it is. I've lost most of my contracts because of the trial delays, and now, with all my equipment destroyed..." Her voice cracked. "I don't know what to do." Henry didn't hesitate. "Come here." "What?" "Come here. To my house. You can stay as long as you need. You'll be safe. You can work remotely on whatever contracts you can salvage, and you won't be alone." Henry, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. And before you argue, think about this. Marcus doesn't know where I live. He doesn't know we're still in contact. You'll be off his radar completely. Mara was silent for so long that Henry thought the call had dropped. Then quietly, Are you sure? I'm sure. Pack what you need. I'll drive down and get you this afternoon. What about Lily? What about Christmas? I can't impose on... Lily will be thrilled. And Christmas at my house is pretty low-key anyway. We could use the company. Henry pulled on his shirt. Text me the hotel address. I'll be there by 2. He made the drive in just under 2 hours, his truck loaded with empty boxes in case Mara needed to salvage anything from her apartment. She was waiting in this hotel lobby, looking smaller somehow than she had in his memory. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face pale without makeup, and she was still using one crutch for stability, even though the walking boot was gone. When she saw him, something in her expression broke and reformed. You came. Of course I came. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, the crutch clattering to the floor between them. Henry held her, feeling the tremor in her shoulders that said she'd been holding herself together by sheer will and was only now allowing herself to fall apart. I've got you, he said quietly. You're safe now. They went to her apartment so she could pack. The damage was worse than Henry had expected. Furniture overturned, papers scattered, a sledgehammer taken to her expensive surveying equipment. Mara moved through the destruction with a blank expression that worried Henry more than tears would have. 5 years of work, she said, picking up pieces of a shattered GPS unit. I built this business from nothing, and he destroyed it in one night. He destroyed equipment. He didn't destroy you. Henry started gathering clothes that hadn't been damaged. And equipment can be replaced. With what money? My insurance will cover some of it, but the deductible alone is more than I have right now. Henry wanted to offer to pay for it, but he knew that would be the wrong move. Mara's pride was already bruised. Instead, he said, one problem at a time. Right now, we focus on getting you somewhere safe. The rest we'll figure out together. By 4 o'clock, they were heading back toward the mountains with Mara's salvaged belongings packed in the truck bed. She was quiet for most of the drive, staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. Finally, she spoke. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Helping me. Again. You barely know me, Henry. We spent one night together in a fire tower, and now you're letting me move into your house 3 days before Christmas. This isn't normal. Henry kept his eyes on the road. You're right, it's not normal. But nothing about how we met was normal, and maybe I'm doing this because when I found you on that mountain, sitting in the rain with a broken ankle, you didn't give up. You were angry, you were in pain, but you weren't defeated. That kind of strength is rare, I respect it. Or maybe you have a savior complex. The words were sharp, defensive. Henry took them without flinching. Maybe I do, but that's not why I'm helping you. I'm helping you because you need help, and because I can provide it, and because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because I want to know what happens next, in your story, in whatever this is between us. Mara turned to look at him. What if there's nothing between us except trauma bonding and gratitude? Then at least we'll know. But what if it's more than that? What if it isn't? Then you'll have had a safe place to stay while you got back on your feet, and I'll have had company during the holidays. Either way, nobody loses. Mara turned back to the window, but Henry saw her reflection in the glass. She was smiling. Lily was waiting on the front porch when they pulled up, bundled in her purple winter coat and bouncing with barely contained excitement. Mrs. Chen stood behind her, hands on Lily's shoulders to keep her from launching into the snow. Is that her? Lily stage whispered. Is that the mountain lady? Her name is Mara, Henry reminded her as he climbed out of the truck. And yes, that's her. Mara navigated out of the passenger seat with careful precision, and Lily's eyes went wide at the sight of the crutch. Does your ankle still hurt? Sometimes, Mara said. But it's getting better. You must be Lily. I am. Daddy talks about you all the time. He said you're really brave and that you document things really well. What does document mean? It means I take very careful notes and pictures of my work, Mara explained, crouching down to Lily's height despite the difficulty. I'm a land surveyor. I measure property boundaries and make maps. That sounds cool. I like maps. We have a big map of the world in my classroom, and I put pins in all the places I want to visit someday. Where do you want to visit most? Antarctica, because of the penguins. Mara grinned. Excellent choice. Penguins are very serious about property boundaries. They could use a good surveyor. Lily giggled and immediately grabbed Mara's free hand. Come on, I'll show you your room. Daddy cleaned it all day yesterday, and Mrs. Chen brought extra blankets because Daddy said you get cold easy. Henry caught Mrs. Chen's knowing look as Lily dragged Mara inside. The older woman stepped close and lowered her voice. She seems like a good person. She is. And you care about her. It wasn't a question. Henry nodded. I do. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but nothing. When you find someone worth caring about, you don't apologize for it. You just make sure you do right by them. Mrs. Chen patted his arm. Now go help that girl get settled before your daughter talks her ear off. Inside, Henry found Mara sitting on the edge of the guest bed while Lily showed her every stuffed animal in her collection and explained their individual personalities in exhausting detail. Mara was listening with genuine interest, asking questions, making Lily laugh. Something in Henry's chest loosened at the sight. That evening, after Lily was in bed and the house was quiet, Henry made tea and found Mara standing in his living room, studying the photo wall Lily had mentioned. It was a collection of frames covering one entire wall, pictures of Henry's father in his firefighter uniform, Henry's late wife holding baby Lily, Lily at various ages doing various activities, Henry and his volunteer SAR team after successful rescues. You have a good life here, Mara said softly. You've built something solid. Henry handed her a mug. It wasn't always solid. After my wife died, I didn't know how to be both parents. I didn't know how to work and take care of Lily and process my own grief. It took time. How did you do it? One day at a time, one decision at a time. And I had help. Mrs. Chen, the other parents at Lily's school, my SAR team. Nobody gets through hard things alone. Mara sipped her tea, still looking at the photos. I've been alone since I started my business. Marcus was my partner, but he was never really my friend. And after he turned on me, I realized I didn't have anyone I could count on. No family nearby, no close friends, just work. That changes now. She looked at him. Does it? If you want it to. Before Mara could respond, his phone rang. Unknown number, but Henry recognized the area code as local law enforcement. He answered. Mr. Vance, this is Sergeant Rodriguez from the county sheriff's office. Is Mrs. Sutton with you? Henry's pulse kicked up. Yes, why? We need both of you to come to the station tomorrow morning. There's been a development in the Hale case. The trail camera that recorded him moving the survey markers. We went back through the full archive. There's more footage. A lot more. What kind of footage? Rodriguez's voice was grim. The kind that changes this from sabotage to attempted murder. Can you be here at 9? We'll be there. Henry ended the call and looked at Mara, whose face had gone pale. What did they find? I don't know, but Rodriguez said it changes everything. The next morning, they sat in a conference room at the sheriff's station while Rodriguez and the deputy prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen Walsh, set up a laptop. Before we show you this, Walsh said, I need to prepare you. This footage is disturbing. It shows premeditation and malicious intent. If you need to stop at any time, just say so. She hit play. The video was from the same trail camera that had caught Marcus moving the survey markers, but the timestamp was different, 7 hours earlier, before dawn on the day of the fire. The footage showed Marcus hiking into frame carrying a large backpack and what looked like surveying equipment. He spent several minutes examining the area, checking his GPS, making notes. Then he pulled out a container from his backpack. That's the accelerant, Rodriguez said. Watch what he does next. Marcus walked off trail, deeper into the forest, placing the accelerant in strategic locations. He was methodical, careful, clearly experienced in setting fires. When he finished, he returned to the trail and used the surveying equipment to move the boundary markers exactly as Mara had described. But it was what he did after that made Mara gasp. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call. The camera had no audio, but the timestamp showed he was on the call for 3 minutes. Then he checked his watch, looked back toward where he'd placed the accelerant, and smiled. He'd known exactly when Mara would be arriving. He'd known she would follow the false markers, and he'd set the fire to start exactly when she would be in the most dangerous location. He wasn't just trying to sabotage you, Walsh said quietly. He was trying to kill you and make it look like an accident, a tragic case of a surveyor caught in a wildfire that started naturally. Mara's hands were shaking. Henry reached over and took one, grounding her. But it didn't start naturally, Rodriguez continued. And when you survived and made it to the fire tower with Mr. Vance, Marcus panicked. That's why he showed up at the trailhead the next morning, pretending to be concerned. He needed to know if you'd survived, and if so, whether you had any evidence. The break-in at my apartment, Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper. He was looking for the camera and field notebook, the evidence Henry rescued. Exactly, which is why we're upgrading the charges to attempted murder in the first degree, arson with intent to harm, and evidence destruction. His bail has been revoked. He's back in custody as of 6 this morning. Walsh leaned forward. Ms. Sutton, with this footage and the evidence you already provided, we have an airtight case. But we need you to be strong. His defense team will try to paint you as unreliable, as someone who made mistakes and is blaming him to cover your own incompetence. Can you handle that? Mara squeezed Henry's hand, then released it. She sat up straighter. I can handle it. I've been handling Marcus Hale's manipulations for 2 years. I'm not afraid of his lawyers. Good. Trial is set for late February. Until then, stay somewhere safe. We don't think Marcus can reach you from jail, but we can't be certain he didn't have accomplices. After the meeting, Henry drove them back home in silence. Mara stared out the window, processing everything they'd learned. Finally, she spoke. He really tried to kill me. Yes. Over a business contract, over his ego. Some people value power more than human life. Mara turned to look at him. You don't. No, I don't. When you found me on that mountain, when you decided to carry me instead of leaving me, did you have any idea what you were getting into? Henry almost laughed. Not even a little bit. I thought I was doing a standard medical evacuation. Turned out to be considerably more complicated. Are you sorry? He pulled into his driveway and turned off the truck. Then he looked at her directly. Not for 1 second. Even though I'm currently living in your house, disrupting your life, bringing danger and legal drama to your doorstep 3 days before Christmas? Even though. Why? Henry reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his hand lingering against her cheek. Because when I carried you up that mountain, something shifted. I'd spent 10 years carrying guilt, carrying the weight of one failed rescue, carrying the responsibility of being both parents to Lily. And somewhere in those hours of walking through fire and rain, I realized I was carrying you differently, not out of duty or guilt, but because I wanted to. Mara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Henry, I'm not asking you for anything, he continued. I'm not expecting gratitude or romance or anything beyond what you're willing to give. But I need you to know that having you here isn't a burden. It's a choice I'm making every day, and I'll keep making it for as long as you need. A tear spilled down her cheek. I don't deserve... Don't. His voice was gentle but firm. Don't tell me what you don't deserve. You survived someone trying to murder you. You protected evidence that will put him away. You're rebuilding your entire business from scratch. You deserve every good thing that comes your way. Mara leaned forward until her forehead rested against his. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, existing in the same space. I'm terrified, she whispered. Of Marcus? Of this. Of you. Of what it means that I feel safer with you than I've felt anywhere in years. Henry pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Fear is okay. Fear means it matters. And what if I mess this up? What if the trial breaks me? What if I can't rebuild my business? What if... He kissed her, soft and brief and full of everything he couldn't put into words. When he pulled back, Mara was staring at him with wide eyes. What if you don't mess it up, he said. What if you're stronger than you think? What if this is exactly where you're supposed to be? Before she could answer, the front door burst open and Lily came running out in her socks. Daddy, Mara! Mrs. Chen made cookies and says we have to decorate them before they get cold. Come on! Henry and Mara looked at each other and started laughing. The moment broke, but something had shifted between them, something that felt less like survival and more like possibility. They spent that afternoon decorating cookies with Lily, who had strong opinions about proper frosting to sprinkle ratios. Mara proved surprisingly artistic, creating elaborate designs while Lily made enthusiastic if chaotic attempts. "Yours are so pretty," Lily said, examining Mara's perfectly frosted snowflake. "Mine look like blobs." "Blobs are good," Mara assured her. "Blobs are unique. Nobody else has blobs exactly like yours." "That's what Daddy says about my artwork, too." "Your daddy is a smart man." Lily looked between them with the knowing expression of a child who understands more than adults give them credit for. "Are you going to stay forever?" Mara's hand stilled on the cookie she was decorating. "I don't know, sweetheart. Right now I'm just staying until I feel safe again." "But you're safe here. Daddy makes everything safe. He's like a superhero but without the cape." "Lily," Henry warned gently. "What?" "It's true. You saved Mara from the fire. You save people all the time. You're basically Superman but with better hair." Mara laughed so hard she nearly dropped her cookie. "Better hair than Superman. That's high praise." That night, after Lily was asleep and the house was quiet again, Henry found Mara on his back porch despite the cold, wrapped in one of his heavy jackets and staring at the stars. "Can't sleep?" he asked, stepping outside. "Too much in my head." She didn't look at him. "I keep thinking about Marcus in that footage, how calculated it was, how little my life meant to him." "You don't have to think about him anymore. He's locked up. He can't hurt you." "But he almost did. If you hadn't found me when you did," her voice broke, "I would have died on that mountain, Henry. Alone and in pain, and everyone would have thought it was just a tragic accident." Henry moved to stand beside her. "But that's not what happened. I did find you. You didn't die. You're here." "Because you refused to leave me." She finally looked at him. "The prosecutor asked me today if I could handle the trial, if I could be strong enough to face Marcus and his lawyers. And you know what I realized?" "What?" "I don't know if I can be that strong alone, but maybe I don't have to be alone anymore." Henry reached for her hand. "You don't. Not if you don't want to be." Mara laced her fingers through his. "Your daughter asked me if I was staying forever. What did you tell her when she asked you?" "I told her that you're welcome here for as long as you need, that our home is your home." "And what if I need longer than makes sense? What if I need—" She stopped, searching for words. "What if you need someone to carry you when you can't walk?" Henry finished. "Then I'll carry you. That's what I do, Mara. I show up. I don't quit. I don't leave people behind." She turned to face him fully. "Even when it's hard?" "Especially when it's hard." Mara stepped closer, and this time when they kissed, it wasn't brief or uncertain. It was the kiss of two people who'd survived fire and fear and found something worth holding on to on the other side. When they finally pulled apart, Mara rested her head against his chest. "I'm still terrified." "Me too. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's exactly what makes it real." They stood there on the porch as snow began to fall, two people who'd met in the worst possible circumstances and were slowly, carefully building something neither of them had planned for. Inside, the house was warm and safe. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: trial preparations, business rebuilding, the slow work of healing from trauma. But tonight, on a porch in the mountains where it had all begun, Henry and Mara chose each other. Not because they had to, but because despite everything, they wanted to. And sometimes, Henry thought as he held her close, that was the bravest choice of all. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow and the smell of coffee brewing in Henry's kitchen. Mara woke to the sound of Lily's excited squealing from downstairs and lay still for a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar room before memory settled back into place. She was in Henry's house, safe, protected, and somehow, against all logic, exactly where she needed to be. She made her way downstairs carefully, her ankles still protesting sudden movements, to find Lily sitting cross-legged in front of a modest Christmas tree hung with handmade ornaments and twinkling lights. Henry was on the couch in flannel pajama pants and an old sweatshirt, hair still rumpled from sleep, looking nothing like someone who'd carried a stranger up a burning mountain, and everything like someone who'd quietly rebuilt a life from tragedy. "Mara!" Lily spotted her immediately. "Santa came, look!" The presents under the tree were thoughtfully chosen rather than extravagant: educational science kits, art supplies, books. But Lily's joy was boundless, and Mara felt something crack open in her chest watching this small family share their Christmas morning. Henry caught her eye and smiled. "Coffee's ready. I made your cup the way you like it." She hadn't told him how she took her coffee. He just observed during the days she'd been staying here, watching quietly the way he seemed to watch everything, filing away details that mattered. Mara settled onto the couch beside him with her mug, and Lily immediately abandoned her new microscope kit to thrust a small wrapped package into Mara's hands. "This one's for you. We got you a present." "Lily," Henry said gently, "you didn't need to—" "Open it," Lily insisted. Inside the wrapping was a compass, vintage brass, beautifully maintained, with an inscription on the back that read, "James Vance, Fire and Rescue, 1985 to 2010. Mara's throat tightened. "Henry, this was your father's. He'd want someone to use it who understands what it means to navigate through dangerous places." Henry's voice was quiet. "And who knows how to find their way home." Mara turned the compass over in her hands, feeling the weight of the gift. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "You can, and you will," Henry said. "Consider it a professional tool. Every surveyor needs a reliable compass." "But your father would have liked you. He had a thing about people who didn't quit when things got hard." Henry reached over and closed her fingers around the compass. "Keep it. Use it. Let it remind you that you're stronger than you think." Lily was already pulling Henry toward her new presents, chattering about which experiment to try first, and Mara sat there holding a dead man's compass and understanding that she'd been given something far more valuable than a navigation tool. She'd been given belonging. The next 2 months passed in a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Mara worked from Henry's house, rebuilding her client list one phone call at a time, reaching out to old contacts and explaining what had happened without dwelling on the trauma. Some clients were sympathetic, others had already moved on to competitors. She took the wins and swallowed the losses and kept moving forward. Henry continued his carpentry work, taking Lily to school each morning and picking her up each afternoon, fitting his schedule around Mara's physical therapy appointments and trial preparation meetings. He never complained about the disruption to his routine, never made her feel like a burden, just quietly adjusted his life to make room for hers. And Lily, beautiful and perceptive and wholly without guile, accepted Mara's presence with the easy adaptability of childhood. She'd taken to leaving little notes around the house. "Good luck at therapy today," and "Your ankle is getting so much better," that Mara kept in a folder in her laptop bag like talismans. But as February approached and the trial date loomed, Mara felt herself beginning to fracture. It started with nightmares. She'd wake gasping from dreams where she was back on the mountain, ankle shattered, watching Henry walk away because she'd told him to leave her. Or dreams where the fire caught them both, where they died together in the tower while Marcus Hale watched from below and smiled. Henry would hear her wake and appear in her doorway without turning on the light, just his silhouette in the frame. "You okay?" "Yeah, just dreams." "You want to talk about it?" "No, I'm fine." But she wasn't fine, and they both knew it. The prosecution team scheduled intensive preparation sessions, making Mara walk through every detail of that day over and over until she could recite it without emotion, until the words felt rehearsed and hollow. They showed her the footage of Marcus setting the fire again and again, training her not to react, not to give the defense any ammunition. "You need to be calm on the stand," Deputy Prosecutor Walsh explained during one particularly brutal prep session. "Marcus's lawyers will try to rattle you. They'll suggest you made errors in your original survey that you're covering up by blaming him. They'll imply you and Mr. Vance fabricated evidence because you're romantically involved. You cannot let them see you upset." "I understand." "Do you? Because right now you look like you're about to cry, and we're just in prep. Imagine how you'll feel with Marcus sitting 20 feet away, staring at you." Mara's hands clenched in her lap. "I said I understand." Walsh softened slightly. "I know this is hard, But we need you strong. Can you do that? Mara thought about Henry lifting her onto his back in the rain, about him running into smoke to retrieve her evidence, about the way he held her on his porch, while snow fell and told her she was stronger than she knew. I can do it, she said. But when she got home that night, she went straight to the guest room and closed the door. She heard Henry's footsteps pause outside, heard him decide not to knock, heard him walk away. The kindness of that space he gave her made everything worse. She was falling apart, and she couldn't let him see it because he'd already given her too much. He'd already saved her too many times. There had to be a limit to how much one person could carry. 2 days before the trial was set to begin, Mara's insurance company called with news about her destroyed equipment. The claim was approved, but the payout was 60% of replacement value, not the full amount she'd expected. There's a clause about home business equipment that limits coverage, the adjuster explained in the tone of someone reading from a script. You should have had a separate commercial policy. I had a commercial policy. Through your company. That policy covered liability, not equipment loss due to criminal activity. I'm sorry, but this is the maximum payout we can authorize. Mara ended the call and stared at the numbers on her laptop screen. Even with the insurance money, even with the few clients she'd managed to retain, she didn't have enough to replace the high-end GPS units and survey equipment she needed to actually do her job. She could buy cheaper alternatives, but that would mean lower accuracy, which would mean fewer contracts, which would mean... Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Mara Sutton? Yes? This is Thomas Chen from Pacific Northwest Survey Consortium. I worked with you on the Riverside Development Project 3 years ago. Mara remembered him vaguely, an older surveyor with decades of experience who'd been gracious when she'd made a minor error in her initial calculations. Mr. Chen, how can I help you? Actually, I'm calling to help you. I heard about what happened with Marcus Hale, and I wanted you to know that the surveying community doesn't tolerate that kind of behavior. We take care of our own. I appreciate that, but I'm not just offering sympathy. I'm offering equipment. I'm retiring next month, and I have a full set of professional-grade survey gear that I'm willing to sell to you at cost. No markup, just what I paid for it. Should be enough to get you operational again. Mara's breath caught. Mr. Chen, I can't afford... At cost, Ms. Sutton, and I'm willing to accept payment over time. No interest, no contracts. Just one surveyor helping another. He paused. Marcus tried to destroy you because he was afraid of your talent. Don't let him win by giving up now. Mara found herself crying for the first time since the apartment break-in, but these were different tears. Why would you do this for me? Because 30 years ago, when I was starting out, and made a catastrophic error that cost me everything, someone gave me a second chance. I'm just passing it forward. What do you say? I say yes. Thank you. I say yes. After she hung up, Mara sat in the guest room with tears streaming down her face and realized that she'd been so focused on what she'd lost that she'd stopped seeing what she still had. She had people willing to help. She had Henry and Lily. She had a dead firefighter's compass in her pocket that reminded her how to find home. She had survived attempted murder and was still here, still fighting. The door opened quietly, and Henry stepped inside. He didn't ask if she was okay. He just crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, and Mara let herself break completely against his chest. I'm so tired, she sobbed. I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of pretending this doesn't terrify me. Oh, then stop pretending. Henry's voice was steady. You don't have to be strong all the time. That's what I'm here for. You've already done too much. There's no such thing as too much when it comes to people you care about. Mara pulled back to look at him. Is that what this is? Caring? You know it is. I don't know anything anymore. I don't know if what I feel for you is real or just trauma bonding. I don't know if I'm staying here because I'm falling in love with you or because I'm too scared to be alone. I don't know. Henry kissed her, stopping the spiral of words. When he pulled back, his eyes were intense. You want to know what I know? I know that I think about you every morning when I wake up and every night before I sleep. I know that Lily asks me at least once a day if you're going to stay forever because she's already attached to you, and so am I. I know that when I watch you rebuild your business piece by piece, when I see you refuse to let Marcus break you, I'm in awe of your strength, even when you think you have none left. Henry, I know this started in the worst possible way. I know the timing is terrible. I know you're dealing with trauma and legal battles and your whole life being upended. But I also know that what I feel for you isn't about the fire or the rescue or any of that. It's about who you are when you think no one's watching. It's about the way you listen to Lily's stories like they're the most important thing in the world. It's about your refusal to give up even when giving up would be easier. Mara's tears had stopped, replaced by something that felt dangerously like hope. What are you saying? I'm saying that when this trial is over, when Marcus is locked away and you've rebuilt your business and had time to process everything, I want to still be here. I want you to still be here. I want us to figure out what this is when we're not in survival mode. And if I can't give you that right now, if I need to focus on the trial and getting my life back, then I'll wait. I'm good at waiting. Henry cupped her face in his hands. But I need you to know that you're not alone in this. Not in the trial, not in rebuilding, not in any of it. You understand? Mara nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Good. Now, have you eaten today? The question was so practical, so perfectly Henry, that Mara laughed through her tears. No. Then let's fix that. And then you're going to tell me about the phone call that made you cry, because those sounded like good tears at the end. Over dinner, Mara told Henry and Lily about Thomas Chen's offer. Lily was thrilled, immediately launching into ideas for what Mara could survey first once she had her new equipment. Henry listened quietly, and when Mara finished, he simply nodded. See, the world's not all Marcus Hales. Sometimes people show up to help. Like you showed up, Mara said. Like a lot of people show up. You just have to let them. That night, Mara slept without nightmares for the first time in weeks. The trial began on a gray February morning with freezing rain that turned the courthouse steps treacherous. Henry had wanted to come, to sit in the gallery and provide silent support, but Mara had asked him to stay home with Lily. She needed to know they were safe, away from all of this, living their normal life while she did what had to be done. Marcus Hale looked smaller in person than he had in her nightmares. He sat at the defense table in an expensive suit with his team of lawyers, and when Mara entered the courtroom, he didn't even glance her way. She was that insignificant to him, even now. The prosecution's opening statement was methodical and damning, walking the jury through the evidence piece by piece, the trail camera footage, the accelerant purchase, the moved markers, the break-in at Mara's apartment. Walsh was brilliant, painting a picture of premeditation and malice that left no room for doubt. The defense's opening was exactly what they'd prepared Mara for. Marcus was a successful businessman who'd made a competitive but legal decision to start his own firm. Any suggestion of sabotage was the paranoid fantasy of a former partner who couldn't accept that she'd lost clients due to her own professional shortcomings. The fire was a tragic accident, and Marcus's presence on the mountain was purely coincidental. Mara sat in the witness waiting room and listened to the proceedings through a speaker, her hands clenched around the brass compass in her pocket. When they called her to testify, she walked to the stand with her head high and her limp barely noticeable. She'd practiced this, prepared for this, steeled herself for this moment. Walsh led her through her testimony with precision, her training, her business relationship with Marcus, the pattern of sabotage, the events of that September day. Mara kept her voice steady, her answers clear, her emotions locked down. Then the defense attorney stood for cross-examination. He was a slick man in his 50s with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Sutton, you've painted quite a dramatic picture of my client. Let's examine some facts, shall we? Of course. You claim Mr. Hale deliberately moved survey markers to sabotage your work. But isn't it true that you'd received complaints about inaccurate surveys before your partnership with Mr. Hale ended? I received one complaint that was later proven to be unfounded. The client had misread the initial survey documents. One complaint you're aware of. How many complaints might exist that you simply dismissed? Walsh objected. Speculation. Sustained. The defense attorney smiled. Let me rephrase. Ms. Sutton, have you ever made an error in a professional survey? Mara met his eyes. Yes, once, early in my career, I corrected it immediately and notified all affected parties. So you have a history of errors. I have a history of being human and learning from mistakes. Every surveyor does. Including Mr. Hale? Mr. Hale's errors were deliberate, not mistakes. You say that with such certainty. Tell me, Mrs. Sutton, when exactly did you and Mr. Vance begin your romantic relationship? The question landed like a slap. Walsh was on her feet immediately. Objection. Relevance? The judge looked skeptical. Counsel, where are you going with this? Your Honor, the prosecution's case relies heavily on evidence allegedly recovered by Mr. Vance, a volunteer search and rescue worker who now admits to a personal relationship with the witness. The timeline of this relationship is relevant to questions of bias and evidence handling. The judge considered. I'll allow it, but get to the point quickly. The defense attorney turned back to Mara. When did your relationship with Mr. Vance begin? Mara forced herself to breathe steadily. We met the day of the fire when he rescued me. Our relationship developed after that. How convenient. So the man who recovered your crucial evidence is also the man you're romantically involved with. Isn't it possible that Mr. Vance, eager to help someone he cared about, might have been less than scrupulous about the chain of custody for that evidence? No, Henry would never... Henry, how familiar. Tell me, Ms. Sutton, did you and Henry discuss what should be in your field notes before he recovered them? No. Did you tell him what photographs you needed to support your sabotage claims? No. The photographs and notes were created before I ever met Henry, before the fire. But we only have your word for that, don't we? The metadata on digital files can be altered. Notes can be written after the fact and backdated. Mara's hands were shaking now. I didn't alter anything. Everything in that evidence is exactly as I recorded it on the mountain. Of course you'd say that. Just as you'd say Marcus Hale tried to murder you, despite the fact that he has no history of violence, has built a successful business, and had no reason to want you dead when he could simply outcompete you in the marketplace. He wanted me dead because I wouldn't disappear quietly, because I kept fighting for my business despite his sabotage, or because you needed a dramatic story to explain away your professional failures and the convenient affection of a local hero who could validate your claims. Walsh objected again, and the judge sustained it, but the damage was done. The defense had planted doubt about the evidence, about Henry's involvement, about Mara's motivations. When they finally released her from the stand after 2 hours of cross-examination, Mara felt hollowed out. She'd kept her composure, hadn't broken down, hadn't given them the emotional response they'd been fishing for. But she felt like she'd been flayed alive in front of a room full of strangers. Walsh caught her in the hallway during recess. You did great. Don't let him get in your head. He suggested Henry and I fabricated evidence. He suggested it because he has nothing else. The trail camera footage doesn't lie, Mara. The accelerant purchase doesn't lie. The jury saw through his implications. Did they? Trust the process. We've got this. But as Mara sat through the rest of the trial, expert witnesses confirming the accelerant analysis, fire investigators explaining ignition patterns, Henry taking the stand to testify about the rescue and evidence recovery with calm professionalism that the defense couldn't shake, she felt herself disconnecting. She'd thought winning the trial would give her closure, would let her move forward. But sitting in that courtroom day after day, listening to her near-death experience dissected and questioned and turned into legal strategy, she realized that no verdict would erase what Marcus had done to her. The trial lasted 8 days. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Marcus Hale showed emotion for the first time, a flash of rage that he quickly suppressed. He was remanded into custody immediately, his bail revocation maintained. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Walsh hugged Mara in the hallway afterward. We did it. He's going away for a long time. Yeah, Mara said numbly. We did it. Sergeant Rodriguez shook her hand. Justice served, Ms. Sutton. You should be proud. Thank you. But as she walked out of the courthouse into the February afternoon, Mara felt nothing like pride. She felt exhausted. She felt empty. She felt like she'd won a battle but had no energy left for the war of rebuilding that still lay ahead. Henry was waiting at the bottom of the steps, having left Lily with Mrs. Chen so he could be there when the verdict came in. When he saw Mara's face, he didn't ask about the trial. He just opened his arms. Mara walked into his embrace and finally, let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. Relief, grief, rage, fear, love. "It's over," Henry murmured against her hair. "You did it. It's over." But even as he held her, even as she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop spinning, Mara knew it wasn't over. The trial was done. Marcus was convicted. Justice had been served. But the real test was just beginning. The test of whether she could actually rebuild from this, whether she could trust herself and her judgment again, whether what she felt for Henry was strong enough to survive outside the crucible of crisis. She didn't know the answers yet. She just knew that for now, on the courthouse steps in the freezing rain, Henry Vance was holding her like he'd held her on the mountain, firmly, completely, with absolute refusal to let go. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start from. The days after the verdict felt strange and unmoored, like waking from a fever dream to find the world had continued on without waiting. Mara went through the motions, answering congratulatory calls from Deputy Prosecutor Walsh, fielding interview requests from local news stations that she politely declined, coordinating with Thomas Chen to finalize the equipment purchase. But underneath the surface activity, she felt herself drifting. Henry noticed, of course. He always noticed. "You've been quiet since the trial ended," he said one evening after Lily had gone to bed. They were in the kitchen, Mara washing dishes, and Henry drying them in the comfortable domestic rhythm they'd developed over the months she'd been staying there. "I'm just tired." "Mara." She set down the plate she was washing and turned to face him. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. Everyone keeps saying I should be happy, relieved, celebrating that justice was served, but I just feel empty." Henry set down his dish towel. "You've been in survival mode for 6 months. Your body and mind are probably trying to figure out what comes next now that the immediate threat is gone." "What does come next?" "Whatever you want." "That's the problem. I don't know what I want anymore." Mara leaned against the counter. "Before Marcus, I knew exactly what I wanted: build my business, prove I could make it on my own. But now when I think about going back to Portland, about living alone in that apartment again..." She stopped, unable to articulate the hollow fear that opened up in her chest at the thought. Henry moved closer but didn't touch her, giving her space to work through it. "You don't have to go back to Portland. My business is there, my clients are there. Your business is wherever you take it, and you told me yourself that most of your work is in rural areas anyway, not the city." Mara looked at him carefully. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have options. You could stay here. Work from here. Build your business from a place that makes you feel safe, instead of returning to a place filled with bad memories." "Henry, I've already been here for months. I can't keep imposing." "It's not imposing if I'm asking you to stay." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that went far beyond logistics and housing arrangements. "You're asking me to stay," Mara repeated slowly. "Here, with you and Lily." "Yes." "For how long?" Henry met her eyes directly. "For as long as you want, a month, a year, forever. Whatever you're ready for." Mara's heart was pounding. "I don't know if I'm ready for forever." "Then start with tomorrow, and the day after that. And keep going until you figure out what you need." "What about what you need? What about Lily? I can't just move into your life indefinitely without knowing if this is real or if I'm just..." She gestured helplessly. "If I'm just hiding from having to rebuild on my own." "Are you hiding, or are you choosing something different than what you had before?" The question landed like a challenge. Mara turned back to the sink, staring at the soapy water. "I don't know the difference anymore." Henry's hand settled gently on her shoulder. "Then take some time to figure it out, but do it here, where you're safe and supported, not alone in Portland, where every corner reminds you of what Marcus took from you." Mara closed her eyes. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. You're the one making it complicated." "Because it is complicated. Because I..." She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "Because you what?" Mara turned to face him, and suddenly everything she'd been holding back came pouring out. "Because I love you, and that terrifies me. Because I love Lily, and that terrifies me even more. Because I don't know if these feelings are real or if they're just my broken brain clinging to the person who saved me. Because I don't want to wake up 6 months from now and realize I made a huge mistake that hurt you and your daughter because I was too scared to be alone. Henry's expression softened. Do you know what I see when I look at you? Someone who's a mess? I see someone who survived attempted murder and refused to let it break her. Someone who protected evidence while injured and in pain because she knew it mattered. Someone who's rebuilding her entire business from nothing with determination and grace. Someone who listens to my daughter's endless questions like they're important because to you, they are. He stepped closer. I see someone I fell in love with not because I saved her, but because of who she is when she thinks no one's watching. Mara's eyes filled with tears. You fell in love with me? Completely. Probably started on that mountain when you told me to leave you behind, and I realized you'd rather die than be a burden. Definitely by the time we spent that night in the tower, and you turned trauma into dark humor about dying in a wildfire. Absolutely by the time I watched you refuse to let Marcus's lawyers intimidate you on the witness stand. That's ridiculous. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you take your coffee black with 1 sugar. I know you have nightmares about fire but never about falling. I know you organize your survey notes by geographic region and date, then cross-reference by client. I know you cry during nature documentaries but not during sad movies. I know you're terrified of being dependent on anyone, but you're learning to accept help anyway. Mara was crying now, tears streaming down her face. You really pay attention. I pay attention to things that matter. And you matter, Mara. Not because I rescued you, because of who you are. I don't know how to do this. I've never lived with someone. I've never been part of a family. I don't know how to be a... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't even name what she might become to Lily. Then we'll figure it out together, day by day. No pressure, no expectations beyond showing up and being honest about what you need. Mara wiped her eyes. What if I'm terrible at it? Then you'll be terrible at it, and we'll love you anyway. The simplicity of that statement broke something open in Mara's chest. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Henry, burying her face in his chest and letting herself feel the solid realness of him. I want to stay, she whispered. I want to try. Henry's arms tightened around her. Then stay. Try. See what happens. I'm going to mess this up. Probably. I'll mess it up too. That's what people do. You're supposed to tell me we won't mess it up. I'm not going to lie to you. We'll mess it up sometimes, but we'll also fix it together. Mara pulled back to look at him. When did you get so wise about relationships? You've been single for 4 years. I've been single and raising a daughter for 4 years. You learn a lot about communication and patience and forgiveness when you're parenting a small human who has big feelings and no filter. Lily's amazing. She is, and she already loves you. You know that, right? She barely knows me. Kids are good at seeing what's real. She sees someone who treats her with respect, who answers her questions seriously, who doesn't talk down to her. And she sees someone who makes her dad smile in a way he hasn't smiled in years. Mara felt fresh tears threatening. I don't want to let her down. You won't. Not if you keep showing up the way you have been. They stood there in the kitchen for a long moment, holding each other while the dishes grew cold in the sink. Finally, Mara pulled back and wiped her eyes again. Okay, I'll stay. I'll give this a real try. But I need to do it right. I need to contribute. Not just live here like a permanent house guest. I need to pay rent, help with Lily, be an actual partner in whatever this is. We can work out the details, but Mara, yeah? Stop thinking you have to earn your place here. You already have it. 2 weeks later, Marcus Hale was sentenced to 18 years in prison for attempted murder, arson, and related charges. Mara didn't attend the sentencing. She'd given her victim impact statement in writing and asked the prosecutor to read it on her behalf. She had no interest in seeing Marcus one more time and giving him any more of her energy or attention. Instead, she spent that day picking up her new survey equipment from Thomas Chen, who turned out to be exactly as kind as he'd sounded on the phone. He spent 3 hours walking her through each piece of equipment, sharing tips from decades of experience, and refusing to accept her first payment. You can pay me when your business is stable, he said firmly. Right now, focus on rebuilding your client list and your confidence. The money will come. On her way home, and she'd started thinking of Henry's house as home without quite realizing when the shift had happened, Mara stopped at the elementary school to pick up Lily. It was Henry's day to work late on a kitchen installation, and Mara had volunteered to handle pickup. Lily came bounding out of the building with her backpack bouncing and her coat half zipped, chattering before she even reached the truck. "Mara, guess what? We're doing a project on careers, and I told everyone about what you do, and now 3 kids want to be surveyors when they grow up, and Mrs. Patterson said maybe you could come talk to our class about mapping, and..." She finally paused for breath. "Can you come talk to my class?" Mara helped her into her booster seat and buckled her in. "I'd love to. When?" "Next month. Mrs. Patterson is doing a whole unit on careers and community helpers. And I said you were my community helper because you help people know where their property is. And that's important." "It is important. I'd be honored to talk to your class," Lily beamed. "Daddy said you're staying with us forever now. Is that true?" Mara's hand stilled on the seatbelt. "Did he say forever?" "He said for as long as you want, which I think means forever because why would you want to leave? We have hot chocolate every Friday and movie night every Sunday, and Daddy makes really good pancakes, and I like having you here." Mara climbed into the driver's seat, her throat tight. "I like being here too, sweetheart." "Good. Because I was thinking maybe for my birthday you could take me surveying, like a real job. I want to see how you measure things." "Your birthday's not until August." "I know, but I like to plan ahead. Daddy says planning ahead means you're less likely to get surprised by bad things." Mara glanced at Lily in the rearview mirror. "Your dad is very smart." "He is. But you're smart too. You know how to read maps and use computers and fix broken ankles." "I didn't fix my own ankle. The doctors did that." "Yeah, but you survived until the doctors could help. Daddy said that counts for a lot." They drove home through the March afternoon, Lily filling the silence with stories about school and questions about surveying equipment and plans for her birthday that was still 5 months away. And Mara realized that this ordinary afternoon of school pickup and dinner planning and listening to a 7-year-old's stream of consciousness, this was what she'd been missing her whole life. Not the dramatic rescue or the passionate romance or the triumphant victory over evil, just the quiet, steady rhythm of showing up for people who mattered, of being part of something larger than herself. That evening, after dinner and homework and bedtime stories, Henry found Mara on the back porch again, staring at the mountains where it had all begun. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, handing her a mug of tea. "Lily asked me to speak to her class about surveying. She's very proud of you. She barely knows what I do. She knows you help people. She knows you're good at your job. That's enough for a 7-year-old. Henry leaned against the porch railing. "You okay?" "Yeah, I think I actually am." Mara pulled out the brass compass from her pocket. She carried it everywhere now, a talisman and a reminder. "I got a call this afternoon from a developer in Eastern Oregon. Residential project, 40 acres, full boundary survey and topographic mapping. It's a big contract." "That's great. Are you taking it?" I told them yes. It'll mean traveling for the field work, but I can do the computer modeling and final reports from here. Thomas helped me figure out a workflow that'll let me work remotely for most projects. Henry smiled. "So you're really doing this, rebuilding from here?" "I'm really doing this." Mara turned to face him. "And I need to ask you something." "Ask me anything." "When you asked me to stay, when you said you loved me, did you mean it? Or were you just trying to make me feel better after the trial?" Henry set down his mug and moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I meant every word. I love you, Mara Sutton. Not because I rescued you from a fire, not because you needed someone and I was there. I love you because you're brilliant and stubborn and brave in ways that take my breath away. I love you because you challenge me to be better. I love you because when I watch you with Lily, I see the kind of person I want in our lives permanently." "Permanently," Mara repeated. "That's a big word." "It's the right word. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow or make any promises you're not ready for. I'm just telling you that when I think about the future, you're in it, always." Mara felt something settle into place in her chest, a piece of herself that had been floating loose since the fire finally finding where it belonged. "I love you too. I wasn't sure if I did or if I could, but I do. And it's terrifying and exhilarating and nothing like I thought it would be." "What did you think it would be?" "I don't know. Simpler, maybe, less complicated, but everything about us is complicated." Everything worthwhile is complicated. Henry pulled her closer. The question is whether the complication is worth it. It is. You are. This is. Mara reached up to touch his face. I want to build something here. Not just my business, but a life with you and Lily. If you'll have me. If we'll have you? Mara, we already do. He kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promise, and Mara kissed him back with everything she had. Behind them, the mountains rose against the darkening sky, still scarred from last year's fire but already showing new growth in the burned-over places. They stayed on the porch, talking until late, making plans and sharing dreams and learning the shape of a future they'd stumbled into by accident but were choosing on purpose now. And when they finally went inside, Henry took her hand and led her to his bedroom instead of the guest room, a quiet acknowledgement that she wasn't a guest anymore. The spring passed in a blur of activity. Mara took the Eastern Oregon contract and 3 others, building her business back one survey at a time. She spoke to Lily's class about surveying and sparked so much interest that 2 other teachers asked her to come back for their classes too. She started teaching a weekend workshop at the community college about basic land surveying principles, discovering that she actually loved teaching. Henry continued his carpentry work but started taking on larger projects, including a contract to build custom furniture for a new resort development that would keep him busy through the fall. Lily finished 2nd grade at the top of her class and announced she wanted to be either a surveyor or a marine biologist or possibly both. You could survey underwater property boundaries, Mara suggested seriously. That's actually a specialized field. Lily's eyes went wide. You can do that? You can do anything if you're willing to learn and work hard. In June, on the anniversary of the day they'd met, Henry took Mara back to the fire tower. The trail had been reopened after cleanup and restoration work, and the forest was greener than Mara had ever imagined it could be after seeing it blackened and dead. They climbed to the tower together, taking their time, stopping to rest when Mara's ankle started to ache. The tower itself had been refurbished by the Forest Service, cleaned and restocked with emergency supplies. Why did you want to come back here? Mara asked as they sat on the bench where they'd spent that terrifying night. Because this is where we survived, where we decided not to give up. I wanted to see it in daylight, not on fire. Wanted to remember it as the place where we found each other instead of the place where we almost died. Mara looked around the small room, seeing it with new eyes. It's smaller than I remembered. Most things from trauma are. Our minds make them bigger, scarier, more overwhelming than they actually were. Not you. You're exactly as steady as I remember. Henry took her hand. I wasn't always. That night, carrying you up here, I was terrified the whole time. Terrified I'd drop you, terrified the fire would catch us, terrified I was making the wrong call. But I couldn't let you see that fear because you needed me to be certain. You seemed so calm. I was faking it. Fake it until you make it, right? He smiled, but somewhere in those hours, the faking became real. I stopped being afraid and started being determined. Because giving up wasn't an option. Mara leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you. For not giving up. For carrying me. For everything that came after. Thank you for letting me. For staying. For choosing this life with us. They sat there for a long time, watching the afternoon light slant through the windows, before heading back down the mountain together. This time, Mara walked on her own 2 feet, strong and steady, with Henry beside her instead of carrying her. August arrived with Lily's 8th birthday and the party she'd been planning since March. Half her class came to the house for what turned into controlled chaos, involving a treasure hunt that Mara had surveyed and mapped with professional precision, a science experiment that got slightly out of hand, and enough cake to feed twice as many kids. After the guests had left and Lily was crashed on the couch in a sugar coma, Henry found Mara in the kitchen cleaning up wrapping paper and frosting smudges. You survived your first Lily birthday party, he said. Barely. How do you do this every year? Practice and help. Lots of help. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. I have something for you. It's not my birthday. I know, open it anyway. Inside was a key and a deed with her name on it. Mara stared at the papers, not understanding. It's the house, Henry said quietly. I'm adding you to the deed. This is your home, not just a place you're staying. I want it legal and official. I want you to know you belong here. Mara's hands were shaking. Henry, I can't accept this. This is your house, your equity. It's our house. It has been for months. This just makes it official. He took her hands. You don't have to decide right now, but I want you to know that I'm all in, Mara, completely. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I want everything to be official. The house, our relationship, all of it. Mara looked from the deed to Henry's face, seeing the vulnerability there, the hope. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Not yet. Not officially, but I'm letting you know that when you're ready, I will be. Henry Vance, are you pre-proposing to me? He grinned. Maybe. Is it working? Mara set down the papers and wrapped her arms around his neck. You carried me up a mountain. You gave me a home. You loved me when I didn't know how to love myself. You showed me what a real family looks like. She kissed him softly. Yes, it's working. And yes, when you actually ask, my answer will be yes. Yeah? Yeah. But let's wait a while. Let's get through another year together. Let me prove to both of us that I can really do this, that I can be the partner you need and the person Lily deserves in her life. You already are those things. Then another year will just confirm it. Mara smiled against his lips. Besides, I want to make sure Lily approves before we make anything official. As if summoned by her name, Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking significantly more alert than she had 5 minutes ago. Approves of what? Mara and Henry looked at each other, and Henry shrugged as if to say your call. Mara knelt down to Lily's level. How would you feel if I stayed here forever? Like, officially? As part of your family? Lily's face split into the biggest smile Mara had ever seen. You mean like you'd be my real mom? The word landed like a shock and a benediction all at once. Mara's throat tightened. I'd never try to replace your real mom. She'll always be your mom. But I could be another person who loves you. If you want that. Lily threw her arms around Mara's neck. I want that. I want that so much. I asked Daddy if you could stay forever, and he said, only if you wanted to, but I've been wishing really hard that you'd want to. Mara hugged her back, tears streaming down her face. I want to, sweetheart. I really, really want to. Does this mean I get to call you Mom? You can call me whatever feels right to you. Lily pulled back, considering seriously. Can I call you Mara Mom, so I have regular Mom in heaven and Mara Mom here? Mara looked up at Henry, who was wiping his own eyes and nodding. I think that's perfect. Okay, Mara Mom it is. Lily hugged her again, then pulled back with a sudden thought. Wait, does this mean we can go surveying for my birthday? Because we didn't go today because of the party, but we could go tomorrow. Mara laughed through her tears. Yes, tomorrow we'll go surveying. Best birthday ever, Lily announced and ran back to the living room to tell her stuffed animals the news. Henry pulled Mara to her feet and into his arms. Well, that went better than expected. She's incredible. You raised an incredible human. We're raising an incredible human, present tense, together. That night, after Lily was finally actually asleep and the house was quiet, Mara stood on the back porch one more time looking at the mountains. But this time, she wasn't looking back at where she'd been. She was looking forward at all the terrain still left to explore and map and claim as her own. Henry joined her, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. What are you thinking about? About how a year ago I was alone on a mountain with a broken ankle, convinced I was going to die. And now I'm here. I have a home, a family, a business, a future I actually want to be part of. It's amazing what can change in a year. You changed everything. You refused to leave me behind. And you refused to give up. We both had to make that choice, Mara. I could carry you, but you had to hold on. She turned in his arms to face him. I'm still holding on. Good. Don't let go. Not planning to. They stood there together as the stars came out, two people who'd met in fire and smoke and found something worth building in the ashes. Behind them, the house was warm and bright, full of the evidence of the life they were creating. Lily's school art on the refrigerator, Mara's survey maps spread across the dining room table, Henry's carpentry projects in various stages of completion, photographs documenting the family they were becoming. 6 months later, on a February afternoon, Henry proposed officially with his father's firefighter's badge and a simple question. Will you marry me and let me carry you through whatever comes next? Mara said yes without hesitation, and Lily served as their wedding planner, throwing herself into preparations with the same enthusiasm she brought to science projects and birthday parties. They were married in May on the mountainside where it had all begun, surrounded by friends and family and the forest that had tried to destroy them but had instead brought them together. Thomas Chen walked Mara down the aisle. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. Lily was the flower girl and took her job so seriously that she counted each petal she scattered to ensure even distribution. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Lily raised her hand. The officiant looked startled. Yes? I just wanted to say that I'm really happy about this, Lily announced to the assembled guests. Because Mara Mom is the best, and Daddy smiles a lot now, and we're a real family, and I think that's important for everyone to know. The guests laughed and applauded, and the officiant smiled. Duly noted. Anyone opposed? Silence. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. When Henry kissed Mara, she tasted salt from both their tears, joy and relief, and the absolute certainty that this was right, that this was real, that this was the life she'd been meant to find all along. At the reception, Deputy Prosecutor Walsh gave a toast about justice and second chances. Sergeant Rodriguez congratulated them and mentioned that Marcus Hale's appeal had been denied. He'd be staying in prison for the full duration of his sentence. Thomas Chen presented them with a vintage surveying transit as a wedding gift and told Mara he was proud to see her business thriving. But the best moment came at the end of the night, when Lily climbed into Mara's lap during the last dance and asked, "Are you happy, Mara Mom?" Mara looked at her new husband dancing with Mrs. Chen nearby, at the mountains rising in the distance, at the life she'd built from the ruins of the one Marcus had tried to destroy. She looked at the compass hanging on a chain around her neck, Henry's father's compass, which she'd worn as her something borrowed and had decided to keep wearing as a reminder of how to find her way home. "I'm happier than I ever imagined I could be," she told Lily honestly. "You know why?" "Why?" "Because your dad taught me that you don't leave people behind, and you taught me that family is about who shows up and stays, not just who you're born to. And together you both taught me that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us exactly where we're supposed to be." Lily hugged her tight. "I'm glad the mountain brought you to us." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Years later, when people asked Mara how she and Henry had met, she'd tell them the truth, that he'd found her broken on a mountain and refused to leave her behind, that he'd carried her through fire and smoke and helped her rebuild everything she'd lost, that he'd shown her what real love looked like, steady, patient, and absolutely unwilling to quit. But the part she kept private, the part she shared only with Henry in quiet moments, was that he hadn't just saved her life that day. He'd given her a reason to want to live it, and in learning to accept his help, to trust his strength, to lean on him when she needed to and stand beside him when she could, she'd found the missing piece of herself she hadn't known she was looking for. She'd found home, not in a place, though she loved the house they'd made together and the mountains that surrounded it, but in him, in Lily, in the family they'd built from ashes and determination and the simple refusal to give up on each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Henry and Mara hiked back to the fire tower one more time. It had become a tradition. Every year on their anniversary, they'd climb to the place where their story had truly begun and remind themselves of how far they'd come. Lily was 15 now, planning to study marine biology and environmental science in college, already talking about using surveying skills to map ocean ecosystems. She'd stayed home this time to finish a school project, trusting her parents to make the climb on their own. At the top, Henry and Mara sat on the same bench where they'd spent that terrifying night 11 years earlier. The tower was exactly the same, but everything else had changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Mara asked, not because she doubted, but because she liked to hear him answer. "Running into that fire? Taking on all my baggage?" Henry pulled her close. "Not for 1 second. You were never baggage, Mara. You were possibility. You still are. Even now that I'm boring and domestic and have surveying equipment permanently taking over the garage, especially now," he kissed her forehead, "because boring and domestic with you is more interesting than anything else I can imagine." Mara laughed and settled against his shoulder, looking out at the view. The forest had fully recovered from the fire, green and thriving, no trace remaining of the devastation that had once consumed these slopes. "I used to wonder," she said quietly, "if what we had was real, or just trauma bonding, if we'd stay together once the crisis was over. And? And I was an idiot for wondering. This is the most real thing I've ever had." "Good, because you're stuck with me now." "Stuck implies I want to be anywhere else."
Do you?
Mara looked at him, at the gray starting to thread through his hair, at the lines around his eyes from years of smiling, at the steadiness in his gaze that had never wavered in all their years together. "Not for 1 second. I'm exactly where I choose to be." Henry stood and offered his hand. Ready to head home. Mara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet, but this time she didn't need him to carry her. She walked beside him, their hands linked, their steps matched, descending the mountain together. Because that was what they did. They showed up for each other. They carried each other when needed. They walked together when they could. And they never, ever left anyone behind. At the base of the trail, Mara paused and looked back one more time at the mountain that had tried to destroy her and had instead delivered her to the life she was meant to have. "Thank you," she whispered to the mountain, to fate, to whatever force had put her on those steps with a broken ankle exactly when Henry Vance was running toward the smoke. Henry squeezed her hand. "Ready?" Mara turned toward home, toward the house they'd built together, toward the daughter waiting for them, toward all the ordinary, extraordinary days still ahead. She touched the compass at her neck, feeling its familiar weight. "Ready," she said. "Let's go home." And hand in hand they walked toward the future they'd chosen, toward the family they'd built, toward the love that had survived fire and fear and every test that mattered. They'd started on a mountain in smoke and rain, two strangers bound by crisis. They'd become something unshakable. They'd become home.